Alright, what's up guys? So today is the 25th of February 2017 and it is Friday and we are going to be experiencing, technically it's actually Saturday now because it's 1:16 a.m. There goes my time management or lack thereof kicking in. Thank you, Pisces season. So I'm going to discuss things about the solar eclipse, not just this solar eclipse in particular, but a lot of the interpretations and symbolism. I will go over what kind of personal internal crisis or challenges someone might be addressing or developing in this case. Eclipses can trigger energies that have yet to be known to the native, so it's something hidden, a 12th house associated since it's a Pisces solar eclipse. Or it could be something that they just didn't understand how to resolve before, or something that they've been subconsciously or consciously neglecting. So I'll go over how conjunctions with this eclipse in particular will trigger some problem-solving, resolution kind of narratives for you to apply to yourself. That's assuming you know your natal chart. If you're still in the noob category, you're going to need a chart done. You can either go through generators online, or you can get a real chart and a real reading and also have some follow-up answers and interpretations of what your chart is supposed to signify. If you notice, I focus on primarily psychological associations with my astrological interpretations. So you won't be able to get any clue of any kind of astro-psychoanalysis from any of those generated sites. So it's up to you what you're looking for. If you seem to be watching my videos, it's because you either are tired of really diluted Piscean kind of narrative, telling you all the cute and inspiring kind of things. So an eclipse will occur twice each year, and there's a lunar and solar, and they're 14 days apart. These eclipses have an 18 to 19 year cycle, so they have patterns and everything. Specifically, within a 1.5 to 2 year duration, the eclipses that happen each year will likely fall in the same signs, meaning that those eclipses in particular for those years will be correlating together with themes. We had 2.5 years ago a Pisces solar eclipse. Actually, yeah, 2015. So 2 years ago, we had a Pisces solar eclipse in March. And so that was supposed to essentially signify the lack of consistency and predictability, and because that would be the Piscean archetype personified, Neptune, essentially. And as I mentioned in my Pisces Mercury or Pisces transit video, I can't remember, the Malaysian air flights that disappeared actually are an event that manifested because of this elusive Piscean stellium, and the eclipse likely contributed to that as well. Eclipses can be interpreted as malefic, prophesizing doom, or catastrophic events. The associations with just ancient cultures and stargazing in general happened because they were always observing it, and then they were in fear because of loss or traumatic events, or disastrous weather, or plagues and that would be threatening human lives. Those are the interpretations that stuck the most and continue to be perpetuated through generations down into the future, and that's why, in particular, I think personally, a lot of the transits or interpretations in medieval astrology that people still are aware of today, and when I say people, I mean astrologers, is the malefic, anxiety, prone kind of scary phobia ones, because fear is a motivational factor. Yeah, so with a solar eclipse, the light is blocked out. So essentially, on a symbolic level, the sun, representing the self or the conscious being, will then be blocked out or elusive to Earth's view, meaning that that's the loss of sense of self. The loss of sense of self means that the sun sign means absolutely jack shit, specifically with solar eclipses, because it's literally the moon is acting as if the sun does not exist. So in a symbolic, macrocosmic kind of level, anything that the sun represents to an individual or collective is non-existent and irrelevant because of the lack of perspective. And it being in Pisces, lack of clarity and perspective will be apparent. Also, the fact that it is in Pisces. Pisces is the sign that is associated with Neptune. Neptune is associated with elusiveness, secrets, and also your subconscious mind or your soul archetype, the channel more or less between your soul and your ascendant. There's going to be an overactive subconscious on top of us going into Mercury being in Pisces, which will debilitate the capacity to, have your mind functioning at all. Now, the identity of the sun, the self, will be almost non-existent. In ancient superstitious associations, darkness in general was associated with demonic or evil origins. So when the sun's blocked out, because basically casting darkness on the earth itself. So when you think of that kind of symbolism, any kind of unknowns, and again, I'm not trying to make associations with Pisces, just the eclipse metaphor, unknowns or dark underneath hidden secrets associations. So the enema, the animus projection from Carl Jung, and anything attributed to your Lilith, Black Moon Lilith, and specifically Eris could also play into this as well. So any kind of dark energies. So the dark energies would associate with those. You can also translate Mars and Saturn, if you're using ancient symbolism, which I use a combination of the two, as being dark energies as well. Pluto also would be categorized, at least for me, as dark. Depending on how you look at it, the South Node could also be like that. The shadow projection is associations that are neglected or blatant disregard of events. So that's crisis that will come up. It works just like the origin of disease. There's symptoms that are undesirable symptoms that will arise. Like when someone gets an infectious virus, a cold or a flu, they will show undesirable symptoms like a runny nose, a scratchy throat, and phlegm in here, or something like that. Those would be considered undesirable, malefic, negative, but those are actually not intended as punishment or torture. It's actually your body going through its normal mechanisms to then alert the physiological person that there is something internally wrong. So when these kind of manifestations start to surface because of an eclipse, it's not supposed to be superstitious punishment or karmatic per se. It is supposed to help push you through some sort of internal challenge, crisis, and even sometimes on a sociological or physical level, physical crisis that you have either been unaware of, neglected to acknowledge, and or have been in denial about. Pisces in particular is great with the denial thing. Us having this huge stellium in Pisces specifically, that whole denial and delusion is going to be ridiculously over-exaggerated. Depending on your own personal intuitive capacities will depend on if you feel this instantaneously as the eclipse happens in about 5-6 hours from now, or you could feel it weeks later, even months later, because it does usually take months for the full effect of the eclipse to release itself. And it can be reactivated. It's like getting another roll of the dice in a game. You get to go again, and it's going to impact the same kind of themes or exacerbate the themes for another 6+ months. And again, and it can continue to reactivate those transits throughout time and cause like a domino effect where it feels like it doesn't ever end. And that's not supposed to be a pun, intentionally at least, with Neptune. Intuition, psychic influences, and channeling insights can happen during this time. I'm experiencing this myself. I feel transits fairly early as opposed to most people who either will feel them, right on cue or later. I've already felt the Mercury in Pisces happen a couple days ago for me, and I have been actually delaying making this video. I would love to blame Neptune for this, but this is entirely my fault as well. It's always my fault. It's important to take responsibility for your actions, not necessarily the influences that made you do those actions. They're a contributing force, but they're not the conscious manifestation that chose to act out on them. So I am delayed by making this video. I actually tried to be disciplined, which totally unlike me lately, and I got pulled away, and everybody else was taking forever. And then I started having a conversation with a friend, and I started having some realization moments, intuitive moments about something personally for me, and that's one thing that I've been trying to implement with myself, is to address my own needs first, and as a result, addressing my needs, I can reciprocate that for other people on a more effective, beneficial level. Eclipses are a triggering aspect, so a snapshot of the actual chart dynamic at the moment of the eclipse is crucial to understand how potentials will play out as a result of this influence. And you can look at that from just transit kind of interpretations, or natal to transit radix, which would be superimposing your planet placements in your own chart with the transit alignments, and that's when the conjunction with personal planets are in your natal chart with this eclipse would be crucial to know. And if anybody wants to know about that, you're more than welcome to contact me and have a report done at least. If you don't want to have a consultation, I can just do reports, and I'm being indecisive right now, but I'm debating on doing a special deal on eclipse interpretations, since this is going to be something that will be impacting everyone for at least the next 6 months, if not longer. Not only is the snapshot of the moment crucial, but being aware of any generational aspect patterns that have either recently have transpired, and or any significant influential aspect patterns that have happened that are going to continue to influence everything. And then another thing to keep in mind is like the mode of the year cycles. So we're in the mutable years, and then Uranus Pluto square, Neptune square Saturn, Jupiter opposition Neptune. Those are generational influences that will continue to perpetuate their themes throughout, global trends and sociological trends as well. You happen to see my first Piscean solar eclipse video I did 2 years ago. I emphasized a lot on the physiological, and that had to do with the fact that the solar eclipse is localized, and it was going over a big body of water. Not that many people. So I translated it to it being more physiological. This one will be more of an individual psychological thing, just because of the intense stress that's been going on throughout these mutable years, the challenges to the mind and brain and perception, and the erratic behavior trends that are as a result of neurosis and that stressful aspects to the brain and the planet placements that are associated with the cognition. So eclipses are attributed to closure, forcing people to let go of past influences. So one thing that this mutable year cycle in particular is going to cause is it's telling you to give it up, let go of your shit, and go with the flow. You're in a uncontrollable, violent current. You've tried every single possible way you can to pull yourself out of this ever-flowing, vast force that's making you go in a direction you don't want to go. You will now, one way or another, realize, and that's what this eclipse is supposed to metaphorically represent, realize that you're never going to have things as they were. You're going to have to let go, or you're going to die struggling. That can be taken metaphorically or literally. So, psychologically, can cause somebody to completely lose their shit and have a lot of psychological disturbances, which is evident with the things I see on social media specifically, I guess. And Eclipse is like in cahoots with Pluto. Plutonians should love eclipses, actually. I find it kind of ironic that I'm so fixated on negativity, but at least in past scenarios. But that's because I was actually experiencing similar scenarios as to what I'm explaining will happen now. So, Plutonians, if they're functioning in a constructive, healthy way, should love eclipses because they do similar things that Pluto would like to do. Force, one way or another, transformation or closure or change with something that has been disregarded or hidden. Elemental influences with eclipses. If the eclipse is in fire, energy flow and activity will be impacted. If it's in earth, it'll be physical, material existence. So that would be more of a mundane generalization kind of thing, if it was in earth. We do have it in water, though, obviously. Air would be mental communication processes. So yes, I'm obviously projecting my self-interest of astro-psychology onto this eclipse, but because water eclipses will affect emotions and security issues, and the emotional intelligence or the emotional process is directly tied and directly linked and influences the cognitive capacities, because the hemisphere is associated with emotion. The left hemisphere is associated with logic and reason. They both exchange neurotransmitted messages to each other. Also, if you have like a water Mercury, for example, or significant water in any of your planets that are associated with the mind, so our capacity to interpret and perceive things through emotional experiences. So the house that the eclipse will inhabit for you when you're looking at your natal chart compared to the transit will show where you need to clean house, where you need to reassess the themes associated with that house. So, for example, if you had, for some reason the eclipse was falling into your 6th house, and you have Gemini rising, I'll just use mine so I don't make this hard on myself, then essentially my 6th house is ruled by Scorpio. My planets that are in Scorpio are Mercury and Pluto. Almost seems like I'm using a real example right now. So the 6th house has to do with your day-to-day routine, your work and service, and your daily habits that impact your health and overall well-being. And so I would have to do an overhaul or a revamp of the course of action that I use to fulfill the needs of the 6th house, which is my health, my daily habits, and stuff like that. So therapeutic intervention may need to be attributed to this house. Some people can't work through their own problems. I think that's something that I'm kind of in denial about, per se. But I also, because of how reserved I am about some of my struggles, I don't think I would have ever opened up to anybody to tell them anyway. So there are definitely ways for you to aid yourself through, this challenging time. But don't be afraid, at least, to look at other alternatives. And if you cannot resolve it on your own, that's when I suggest going to something else. You don't always have to go to a doctor or, a psychiatrist, especially since the first thing they're going to do is put you on some sort of medication that has all kinds of artificial, synthetic, toxic ingredients that will then cause your body to develop some sort of abnormal disease or condition specifically because of those drugs. So trying to let your body figure it out, or you figure it out, and being self-sufficient is the best and most satisfying thing that you could do for yourself. So I highly suggest talk therapy first and foremost, if some individual personal exercises are not being effective for you. And so that's where people like me come in, or you can find a counselor of some kind or whatever. If the energies are suppressed, ignored, or met by resistance, for the potential catastrophic associations can then manifest over time. So that's like the same thing with like pathology of disease. If you get sick, you'll have, minor symptoms. If you continue to overexert the vitality or your energy, and you don't drink your fluids and take some vitamins and rest, and basically try to alleviate any of the symptoms and let your body rejuvenate itself, these symptoms will continue to progress to worse physical effects. That's the same kind of concept if you continue to ignore something. So since everything starts internally, because it's already been proven in studies throughout the last few years, that mental abnormalities or your mental health is directly associated with your physiological stability and health. So the psychosomatic thing is taken to a whole other level. So whatever you decide to bury, suppress, swallow, ignore, be in denial about in your head, that energy is basically the aspects are influencing you to have that kind of cosmic chemistry, and it needs to be released because energy is an ever-flowing force. So if you don't let it out, it'll find a way out, one way or another. And if you don't find a way to willingly let it out, it'll find a way to force itself out and cause even more substantial damage, or have more concerning, abnormal, catastrophic effects as a result of that energy force needing to escape. Using a metaphor for like Pisces, if you try to pick up a slippery fish in the water, you can try to restrict it and hold it still as long as you want, but eventually it's going to slip out of your hands. Hopefully, in that process, that struggle, you don't slip and fall into the water yourself. A natal sun sign being conjunct with this eclipse, so Pisces sun people in particular, that are within 4 degrees of this eclipse. So I believe that this eclipse is going to be at 4 or 6 degrees. I'll double check and just kind of put it in text right here. So it's going to be challenging your sun persona, and this might be one of the most challenging conjunctions, just because of the metaphorical symbolism with the sun being blocked out and the conscious existence of the sun being non-existent in this case, which is blatantly attributed to the Piscean archetype in a Pisces sun sign anyway. They usually have issues deciphering or identifying themselves as an individual because they're so synced in and aligned with the collective good. So how can you shine? Embrace your sun archetype to tap into your natural talents and abilities. So when you don't know yourself, you're unable to benefit from the potential gifts that your natal chart will reveal as something that you could potentially arise or aspire to throughout your self-evolution. Pisces in particular have issues identifying I, me, mine, and without identifying I, me, mine, you cannot then differentiate the difference between what is not you and what is you, and then understand how you as an individual can contribute your unique perspective, talents, or energy to the collective. We look at the moon conjunct the moon. So natal moon conjunct this Piscean moon. So if you have a Pisces moon, it would be, how can you be more empathetic? You would think that normally Pisces moons would be definitely overwhelmed with empathy. Depends on other stressful aspects to it, or any kind of planet conjunctions. Like if you had a Saturn conjunct the moon, it would cause the inability to express empathy. So if you are empathetic, would be the majority of people who have a moon in Pisces. Are you emotionally balanced? Normally, I would say no. That's a lifelong challenge for Pisces moon natives. And it's always important to keep yourself in check. Because again, emotions feed into thoughts, thoughts feed into, personality conflicts, and personality conflicts cause pathology, symptoms, and issues and weaknesses within the self. So are all your needs being met? Because the moon also is attributed to your needs and security and your sense of belonging, your foundation of your emotional capacities and bonding with people. You have certain needs that need to be met emotionally. You need to understand what those needs are, and you also need to make sure that you're having those needs met. If you are a Pisces moon and you specifically have other signs that are more reserved than assertive, you likely have issues articulating or expressing the fact that your needs aren't being met. And that's something that needs to be addressed. Do you feel love and belonging? Do you feel like you're accepted? Do you feel love? Do you feel love in your life? Do you feel empty? Do you feel like the empathy of the collective just dying like I do? And you're letting it affect you specifically? There's another reason why the Piscean archetype is encouraged to recognize and identify itself, because until it disassociates its identity with the collective, its empathy will be the death of it. So we have this eclipse conjunct Mercury. If you have a Mercury in Pisces natally, are you being heard? Is your narrative falling on deaf ears? Are your thoughts being acknowledged, your ideas? Is your narrative projected how you want it to be? So that will contribute to you having some sort of fulfillment with your mental capacities. And that's definitely difficult for people with Pisces Mercury. I went into that lengthy in my Pisces Mercury video, and I'm not going to elaborate again on that. So then we look at the eclipse conjunct Mars. So if you have a Mars in Pisces, how can you assert yourself? Because Pisces being in Mars would be timid, hesitant, passive-aggressive. So are you proactive in your own pursuits? What have you been neglecting to address? What have you been hesitant or in denial or embodying the escapist metaphor with your Pisces Mars? If you're running or in denial or avoiding some sort of action you need to take, this will be forced for you to take it. And with Mars squaring Pluto right now, specifically throughout transit times, it's going to be life or death, or some sort of irreversible consequences for you failing to address this. I'm not trying to go super negative, and I know that a lot of people that will have these conjunctions will have a hardcore Piscean attitude, and they're not going to want to hear this. But hopefully, if it hasn't been, sucking the life out of you, and I say that metaphorically, too much, but just enough for you to kind of get with it and wake up and, cut your delusion associations, this might be the wake-up call that you're looking for. If the eclipse is conjunct to Jupiter placement, so Jupiter in Pisces, build on. What would you like to grow or expand on? It's time to think big. Growing in knowledge and truth, and expanding your own beliefs in mind. So that would be attributed to any body of knowledge, any higher education, or if you'd like to go an alternative route, which the eclipse also kind of manifests as an alternative solution because it's the last resort sort of thing. If other attempts or methods haven't worked, how can you expand yourself inside by your own merits or your own resources? And I guess I'm kind of projecting more or less my go-to methods. I like to do everything myself. And also how you can expand your acceptance or knowledge of the spiritual realm, occult associations, or spirituality in general. So the moon conjunct a Saturn placement in Pisces. Obligations and reliability are the themes. Am I fulfilling my obligations? Are there responsibilities that no longer serve me? Or are there some new responsibilities that need to take priority? It's time to address those issues and to stop being hesitant or evading potential obligations that have likely been neglected for quite some time with the mutable year influence. Especially with Saturn being in Sagittarius, clearly, which is what makes it mutable. So that would be inconsistency with responsibilities, obligations, that sort of thing. So any kind of repercussions as a result of you neglecting responsibilities or obligations can manifest because of this eclipse. So this can be a negative manifestation of that, and or it gives you a time to reflect and address and feel like you have like a clean slate to wrap up what you have been committed to and potentially replace those commitments or responsibilities with new ones. Moon conjunct a Chiron in Pisces, and because Chiron is in Pisces right now too, just double whammy. Repressed wounds will surface now. What is the source of the pain and how can you resolve it? So it's not the Chiron dignity or traits in particular that is the source of the tension that causes the pain, but that's where the wound or the symptom surfaces. So that could be a metaphorical wound, so psychological, emotional, or physical. And so that's a start to address unresolved issues, things that you're in denial about, or things that you may not even be aware of. Because again, Pisces in Chiron Pisces would likely be completely unaware of their defeating behavior. That's the association with the 12th house and the undoing. Then the moon conjunct a Uranus in Pisces placement. How can I feel liberated from norms or restrictions put upon me in my personal life or in society? This is a way for you to channel defiance and your inner rebel. So that's obviously been evident with Uranus and Aries, and with it squaring Pluto and Capricorn, that is associated with the establishment, and there being all kinds of erratic, unpredictable themes, and because of over exaggerated mutable manifestations. So this in particular, because there has been a lot of unrest, and this one will be the volatile one that people need to watch out for, because Uranus again is associated with trauma as well, abnormalities, and so you need to make sure that you don't go too far. And Pisces doesn't understand the concept of too far or enough, and that's what I find concerning about this. Then we look at the moon. If it was conjunct a natal placement in Neptune, which will not happen in any of your lifetimes, so we don't even really have to address this right now. This would actually I don't think it's within 4 degrees of the actual eclipse, so it wouldn't even apply to transit-wise. And then if you have the eclipse conjunct your Pluto, if your Pluto's in Pisces, how many back is that? I don't even think there's I don't even think there's people that are alive with Pluto in Pisces. So that doesn't really apply either. I'm just going to skip it. So the moon, or the eclipse, conjunct your north node. So if you have a north node in Pisces, how can you fulfill your purpose? How can you feel fulfilled? What skills, talents, behaviors are repressed, underdeveloped, or lacking that you need in order to achieve this ascension of purpose? This is essentially a reflection on your personal mission statement. So the extent of your potentials in this life is attributed to your north node. So this is essentially if you're feeling lost, specifically if people have Neptune, or the ruler of Neptune, Pisces, that rules over their 10th house of direction, or if they have a Pisces Saturn as well, a loss of purpose and direction and motivation for your legacy or existence would be lifelong theme with this. So if any of that applies to you, this eclipse could likely trigger some resolution with that and help you kind of understand who you are. And again, don't hesitate to find different ways to potentially resolve that for yourself, or seek out personal counseling as well. You wouldn't be able to go to anybody besides an astrological counselor for that. And I'm not trying to sit there and, advertise for myself, but that's kind of what I do. So you can always hit me up and talk to me about potential charts, reports, or a consultation. We have the eclipse conjunct the ascendant. It would be something about the manifestation of the ascendant's identity. How can you be noticed? How do you acknowledge your identity? What sort of impression do you make on people? And what energy is suppressed by the mask that you show the world? And then if we have the eclipse conjunct the descendant, somebody in particular asked about this on my Facebook. It would be, how can you feel acceptance and belonging with other people? How can you feel connected to others and the collective? Through your relationships, through marriage, through business partners, colleagues, that sorts of thing. What do you need to address partnerships in marriage? You need to potentially understand what your needs are and understand what you as an individual, the self, are able to contribute or bring to the table and fulfill needs of someone else. So I would also say that your series dignity and placement would be something beneficial for you to know, along with just addressing your emotional needs with your moon. So that's a start. Let's go with that. If you need more input than that, then we're going to have to schedule a consultation. Anyway, so if you have the eclipse conjunct your MC, which that's me, actually, what is your contribution to society? What should you be focusing on, and what can you do to excel beyond top, or it is you intend to contribute to society? So your profession, your reputation, and your legacy, more or less. Then the eclipse conjunct the IC would be, what weaknesses plague your stability and foundation? Since the fourth house and the moon is supposed to be your essential emotional and mental development and foundation, and your moral ethics are formed because of this, and the way that you end up perceiving the world, because the polarity is the 10th house, will be directly affected by the fourth house associations. So if you've been having stumbling blocks or developmental associations or with your IC, if you have stressful planet aspects associated with that, those things might be resolved now, or you might feel liberated or finally think of a solution to resolve said stumbling blocks and continue on with your development and building a stronger foundation, which would continue through the Maslow hierarchy of needs, which is directly attributed to knowledge of self and self-fulfillment and emotional and mental well-being and being in sync and nurturing your mind, body, and spirit.